Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to draw your attention to the first industry talk for this conference, which will be delivered by Dr. Ximena Alvira. Dr. Ximena Alvira is a clinical and research manager at Elsevier. She is a medical and neuroscience doctor with a broad experience in clinical practice, research, and medical writing. She joined Elsevier in 2012 as a medical writer, and in the last 3 years has delivered over 120 health research publishing masterclasses, workshops, and research-related webinars globally. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ximena Alvira to deliver an industry talk entitled Current Trends and Challenges in Healthcare AI Research Publishing. Dr. Ximena, the floor is yours.
Nicholas, thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here as a sponsor, also as a presenter. I'm honored to have been invited to this speaking slot. And we have a couple of minutes to go through some of the main concepts related to research and publishing in artificial intelligence, a topic that is increasingly being at the center of the hurricane. So hopefully it's of interest to you, and let's start. So most of us here, or most of you know who we are. We're Elsevier, and who we do, you do. Elsevier has a long history of publishing in healthcare, in medicine, and science in general. And we know of great titles that we have grown with. I myself, as a student, as a medical student, and as a researcher, knew very well most of the titles, or many of the titles. Then we started to put that content into a more technical or digitalized form. And you can see how it has moved to a digitalized and analytical part of content and information. And why is this? It's because everyone understands the need of translating and transforming fixed and static content into actionable information that is useful wherever you are, whenever you need it, where it is, whether it's at the point of care or doing a research in a distant and remote location. So all that siloed information made no sense. And that's why we started a journey years ago to turn that content into actionable. And now we are more known, or started to be known, as an analytical company. That's a little bit on us, but what we're going to talk today is AI. And we're no strangers to the huge amount of data that is being produced daily. And we're not even talking about Google or Facebook or other social platforms. We're talking about healthcare. Since the start of the electronic health record or medical record, huge amount of digitalized data has been input into systems, into the cloud or into the systems. Also from genomic data, medical images, from lab tests, financial data, operational data. This is translated, and this was before COVID, translated into 50 petabytes of data per year. And we can't even imagine how COVID has changed that. So I'm sure this is now old-fashioned data that will have to be updated soon, but I couldn't find more recent information. But if you're wondering what is a petabyte look like, and if anyone grew up in the 80s like I did, you would know what a floppy disk is, and it would take 25 billion floppy disks to fill in 50 petabytes. And now we would say it would translate into 25 trillion pages of printed text. That is too much information. No brain can handle that much amount of information, or no team can do it. And healthcare, and this is healthcare, but also it continues to grow. We are not seeing the stop of this, and it has surpassed and will surpass. This is data from 2017, but nevertheless 2018. The predictions, I think, haven't, of course, at that time didn't take into account COVID. So I think this is way significantly bigger than this graph. But you can see that back then, even the predictions were that healthcare data would surpass by 36% we grow by 36%, surpassing most of the massive industries like manufacturing, financial services, media, and entertainment. So we're talking very big data in this case related to healthcare. And this is where artificial intelligence comes into play, because it is capable of analyzing huge amount of data stored in the form of images, as I said, clinical trials, genomic data, medical claims even, and at a speed and an efficiency that no human skill set can do. Some of the you can see here in the slide, I love this image because it shows quite clearly how what tasks can the traditional healthcare analytics conduct and which ones can be taken over by artificial intelligence. So at the top part, you can see research analytics, basic computing analytics, healthcare to interpret healthcare data, of course, nowhere near to natural language processing capabilities. We can certainly influence diagnostics with a few algorithms, and then of course treatments. What we are used to in the medical world is to inputting some variables to, so to speak, diagnostic, biochemical, physical inputs, and then producing treatments, prescription, surgical, or medical treatments. But when it comes into the reality of artificial intelligence, we can see this exploding into a union of all this data to produce something that actually makes more sense. So it takes into consideration many more variables than we are used to, and that we will ever be capable of analyzing. The clinical data, genomic data, which is also produced at an immense speed, especially again with COVID, it has seen a surge in the technical expertise of producing genomic data. It can take into account demographic data, lifestyle data, and then produce something that is actually making sense to produce algorithms, prediction rules, prediction tasks. So it's the possibilities are endless. The issue, as always, is the information that is put into this system. That will take some time to perfect. But what about healthcare research also? And we've seen also an explosion of research publications, in AI. This article, I really found it very interesting, very easy to understand. I advise as a suggestion that you read through it. And I didn't want to change anything about the image because it just shows so clearly how just in some years, this curve has gone into a steep, extremely steep slope, and the number of publications has increased by more than 6,000%. And the areas that have seen the most explosion or production in scientific output have been pathology, radiology, and surgery. And this is no mystery, because any specialty that is based on imaging or that relies heavily on imaging will see an enormous support from artificial intelligence systems and algorithms and apps or medical devices, because it's data that is quite standardized, that is easily transferable into data that can be analyzed, whereas a medical chart will have notes from the clinicians or the nurses, for example, which will take some more time to be standardized in a way that it can be interpreted by a machine. But you can see here in this beautiful image how the different specialties are being impacted, and we hope to see an increase even more on many of these specialties in the publication side. And also on the clinical trial side, there's an ongoing effort to produce, I would say, the more clinically designed clinical trials or trials, because not all the publications before AI has been put into practice into healthcare have been directed towards healthcare language, I would say. So the development of prospective studies that involve patients and the actual algorithms, AI algorithms put into practice are being increasingly seen, which is one of also the challenges of research is how is that research done? What is the benchmark being used for the studies? So we can see many trials that are currently recruiting or many more that are already completed and awaiting to see a publication. This data is from clinicaltrials.gov, which is one of the largest registries of clinical trials available. So explosion in research, explosion in clinical trials going on. But when and how is this research translating into us, right? Into the patients, into the end users, into clinicians? Well, we also see a growth and increase in the number of FDA-approved medical devices, either artificial intelligence, machine learning, medical devices in the last 5 years. You can see in blue in those approved in Europe, in pink approved in the US. So most of them have been in the areas, and comes to no surprise, of radiology, mostly based on imaging. So it's easier to translate into something applicable, but also cardiovascular, radio imaging, cardiovascular is also quite widely used, and neurological devices. So this is putting AI to work. This is actually happening. And you can see here some of the examples of the more than 200 devices that have been already approved, that they are among us, and they're among us to stay. So we have devices to analyze cardiovascular imaging, devices to analyze breast imaging, neurological MRI imaging. So all this software, all these algorithms working behind the systems, the hospital systems, are there to stay. So the more digitalized the world becomes and the hospitals become, the more we can do with these systems, and the better we can improve patient outcomes in a more efficient way. This is definitely the sole process of AI, is improving patient outcomes, AI in healthcare, and this is where we will see a difference. So hopefully every country will eventually reach that level of maturity of their EHR systems, so we can all take advantage of that AI putting to work. This doesn't come without a cost and with some challenges. And many of us have heard about the problems that AI, not problems, but skepticism that brings with it. So we are not exactly sure about the efficacy and safety and quality. It might be because of the study designs that are being used or that have been used. So we still have a long way to run there. The transparency of the data, how this big black box of data, what happens with the data that's input. Trust. Do we trust the systems? Do we trust the output? We've seen and heard also of problems with image recognition sometimes, privacy issue, what is going to happen with my data, who's going to use it. There's certainly lack of regulation and policies. We'll see how that's starting to work, but still we have a long way to go there, and legal issues and liability. And just to name a very recent example of how this big data can run into trouble and can certainly harm or affect decisions done by organizations. Last year, two very popular journals published an article on how the effects, the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of COVID, using a huge database from a company called Elsevier, more than 90,000 patients in March, when pandemic had just about started. And immediately they were released because that's how fast research and publications were going at the start of the pandemic. And the scientific community went wild trying to understand how did they manage to get that much information and analyzed so fast. And eventually the papers were retracted because of lack of transparency of the methodology. So also researchers have to learn the language. Also, the community has to learn the language, and definitely the editorial publishing vendors and companies have to learn the language to criticize or analyze better and review better those publications. So as researchers, if we're aiming to research on AI, we need to identify new areas. How do I do that? How to identify publications with that have a high societal impact? How do I find researchers that to collaborate with that are doing or want to do the same thing that I'm doing? So there's certainly a few questions that we should ask ourselves when trying to work in this area. So some of the challenges, some of the possible solutions that we can propose or that I want to highlight today to overcome those challenges. For one thing is really exercise our critical thinking, whether we're writing, reading, applying, or using AI publications. And I won't go through the list because it's big, but again, it comes from a very sensible reading, a short guide for medical professionals in the area of artificial intelligence. And it's really useful to understand something that is inevitable, that is happening, and that will happen increasingly more, to understand the important points about it that we need to take care of. Also, providing advanced analytics, applying advanced analytics to the data that researchers produce. Elsevier is contributing to that part as much as we can by using and by producing intelligent solutions that use machine learning to analyze a huge amounts of data. And I just wanted to bring two examples of solutions that do that. One is called Cyval, and it's just, we might take it for granted, but when you see the facts here and you see how many 300 trillion metric values from over 55 million publication records, and you can see how fast this is in real time at the left side of the screen, how fast that data is being analyzed and produced, and we take it for granted. But if I want to see where are the publications happening, well, medicine, most of them. If I click on it, which types of, which areas of medicine. Also, I can see which, is there any collaboration being done? International, national, institutional, governmental, who's publishing in those, in telemedicine and technology, in that topic? Who's that most cited? Who has received the most citations? And then what is this author doing? Who is she, in this case, collaborating with? So you see all this information is working behind the front end of the system and working to provide support to our researchers. We also have Scopus, which does a similar function with a different, it's an exactly similar function in the back, but with different output. Now you can see graphs of what is the research output of healthcare and AI in this case, how has it increased, where is it being published, also who are the authors, which are the institutions that are publishing in this area. So all these platforms, very technically advanced, are put into the service of our researchers and our authors to analyze better scientific production and also analyze better research trends to see where we should put our efforts in the most efficient way, ultimately to make an impact in patient outcomes. So I'm always marveled by the ability to produce these graphs in such a fast way. I love to use these solutions to support our customer base in analyzing their research output. So it's something that I widely use and I widely appreciate, and sometimes, as I said, take her for granted because we don't know the effort that's behind. So regarding regulations and policies, there's also supports being conducted. There's also, there's a lot of, there's some advances being done and efforts being conducted, So the WHO issues the first global report on artificial intelligence in health and 6 guiding principles, which is good to know. Also, the FDA released an artificial intelligence machine learning action plan. Also, the OECD is also working on this, a trustworthy AI in health. So there's certainly efforts from across the globe to try and understand what's happening, because it's definitely not stopping. Also, as researchers and authors, you have toolkits to support yourself with. Equator is one of the most cited or go-to sites that I use, because as it says, it's enhancing the quality and transparency of health research. And you can see here the reporting guidelines have been done as an extension to the existing guidelines. For example, Consort AI extension. We have guidelines for developing and reporting machine learning predictive models in biomedical research. We have Tripod, which is reporting a multivariable prediction model for prognosis and diagnosis. And there's some more toolkits here and more information you can find in Equator, even for dental research. So the more that is being produced, the more that is being input into these sites, and we should go in what is relevant to our research and understand how can we support ourselves to make research that has high quality and is transparent to everyone. So just to finish, again, this quote from this citation with this reference I showed you, we should not be asking whether artificial intelligence takes away the human touch or the art of medicine, but what we should do to improve both with it. So this is the key takeaway message. AI is here to stay. Fortunately for many of us, I would definitely take advantage of it when the time comes for diagnosis and prognosis. And just make sure we always follow good practices, transparent research and ethical research, and that you call us when you need support, analytical support, to understand some of the trends and challenges in research. So this is what I wanted to mention now. I'm sorry about the speed, but I didn't want to take more time from the next speaker. So I'm open to any questions, and thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alvira, for that valuable sharing. And I was very amazed to see the explosion of the amount of publications, exponential, dealing with AI research. We have two questions from the floor. The first one is, apart from transparency and methodology, what are the other key reasons that get AI papers rejected? That's the first question. And the second question is, to what extent does publications in the field of AI are biased towards industries that fund such AI studies? Or to what extent? Yeah.
Thank you. So to address the first question, and thank you for this question, because it's also very close to my heart. As in any type of application, what gets papers rejected is the lack of following good practices when it comes to writing that research. So we might have a beautiful methodology, a very well-designed study, even if it's an AI study, but then we lack the detail, the patience, the knowledge to write that in a way that is understandable to people outside our area of expertise. And when that happens, it stays there. It might get accepted even, but it stays there and nothing happens with that knowledge. And knowledge needs to be translated into something useful. So very basic notions of medical editing will get you definitely give you a higher chance of getting published. A good writing, following the author guide in the right journal is as important as everything else. Because again, we might have an AI paper that includes a prediction rules for ICU, intensive care unit readmission of patients, but then we publish in a very technical journal. That will limit the possibilities of getting noticed and also getting visibility. So targeting the journal, following the author guidelines to the point, every single guidance, suggestion, recommendation they ask from us, we have to follow it. And following some medical writing tips would certainly avoid many of the rejections. regardless of the topic we're talking about. In that sense, we invite you to some talks we're going to give on medical writing. They're free for everyone. We will provide information so you can also learn and learn from those medical writing tips so you avoid them and increase your chances of getting published. That's something that we also do, and that I love doing it all the time. So yes, AI publishing shouldn't be that different from any other type of publishing regarding the quality of the manuscript. That's the key takeaway. And as for the second question, industry is always behind, might always be behind research, right? Pharmaceutical industries, they invest huge amounts of money in research, and that has a good and a bad side. It doesn't have to be bad necessarily, because we need money to research. The issue is being very transparent about any conflict of interest, disclosing them, going through an ethics committee to make sure that the processes and the methods used in the research are completely transparent and are always following good practices. So it has to go through an ethical committee. It has to go through a peer review system also that will ensure, as much as we can, transparency and ethical publishing and unbiased publishing. Because even if it's financed by industry, it doesn't mean it has to be biased. So again, disclosing any conflicts of interest is of utmost importance. And if the organizations, countries, healthcare systems are also interested in financing research, great, but because it would mean to many of us that it would not have an industry interest. But again, that doesn't have to be, that is not exactly always happening. We also see some interest when there's not non-industry related research. So in any case, we have to find finance, to search for finance and financial support, and we have to disclose any relationships we have with anyone who finances us. So I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to stay away from industry. The only thing is that industry will have a very specific objective, and they will want to reach for that objective. Whereas when we're independent from industry, we can research in absolutely any topic that we can, that is feasible to research in. So it would probably limit the scope of the research, but definitely it doesn't have to be biased. We can put into place some practices to make sure that it's an unbiased, ethical, and transparent research. I hope that answers the questions.
Yes, Dr. Alvira, it definitely does. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's about the only questions available right now. But yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Alvira, for that sharing. I'm sure many of the participants in the conference are looking forward to joining master classes and seminars that Elsevier organizes in the future. So thank you so much once again, Dr. Alvira, and do take care and stay safe.
Thank you. You too, please. Thank you very much. See you soon, hopefully.
Thank you.